When most people picture medieval knights, they imagine clumsy men wrapped in iron, swinging oversized swords in chaotic battles. But the truth is far more chilling. The Crusaders of the Middle Ages didn't simply rely on brute strength and raw courage. They carried weapons so devastatingly effective, so meticulously crafted, that even today historians marvel at their design. These were not primitive tools, but highly engineered instruments of death, created to exploit every weakness, pierce every defense, and leave battlefields littered with shattered bodies. Forget the fantasy movie version of medieval combat. What the Crusaders really brought to war was a terrifying arsenal, an entire ecosystem of weapons designed not only to kill, but to psychologically break their enemies before the first strike was even made. Let's begin with the weapon most synonymous with the Crusaders, the sword. But not the oversized heavy iron slabs you see in Hollywood. A Crusader's sword was a marvel of balance and craftsmanship. Measuring roughly 70 to 80 centimeters in length, it was light enough to be wielded with one hand, yet deadly enough to cut through mail armor with shocking precision. Every knight who drew his sword wasn't just preparing for combat. He was holding a symbol of his faith. The cross-shaped guard of the sword echoed the crucifix itself. To the Crusaders, each strike of the blade carried spiritual as well as physical meaning. European swordsmiths, particularly those in Toledo, Spain, were already masters of their craft. Their blades were sharp, resilient, and flexible, capable of withstanding the immense stress of medieval combat. Yet even these masterpieces looked almost ordinary when compared to what Crusaders encountered in the East: Damascus steel. Imported from India and Sri Lanka, Damascus blades, made from mysterious Wootz steel, were legendary. Their distinctive terry patterns weren't just beautiful. They revealed a microscopic crystal structure that made the blades both razor-sharp and unbelievably durable. Imagine being a knight on the battlefield, watching your blows bounce off an enemy's sword while his Damascus blade sliced through your best armor. The psychological weight of that imbalance was as devastating as the physical wounds. While the sword symbolized nobility and skill, the mace represented raw, brutal destruction. Simple in design, a wooden shaft topped with a heavy metal head, the mace didn't require years of training to master. Even a common soldier could swing it with devastating effect. Against armored opponents, swords often failed to pierce, but the mace didn't need to. Its purpose was sheer blunt force trauma. With each crushing blow, helmets caved in, bones snapped, and skulls fractured in ways so catastrophic that forensic experts today classify many injuries as unsurvivable. And medieval engineers weren't satisfied with a simple iron ball. They innovated. Flanged maces had ridges designed to focus force on armor joints. Spiked maces could punch through steel and leather alike. Knobbed versions multiplied impact zones, turning a single strike into several crushing blows. What made the mace terrifying wasn't just its lethality, but the sound. Survivors described the sickening crunch of metal and bone colliding as enough to break a warrior's will before he was ever struck. On medieval battlefields, hearing that sound meant death was moments away. If the mace was raw force and the sword was faith, the battle axe was versatility incarnate. Roughly the size of a sword, it was cheaper to produce and easier to use, making it widely accessible. But its killing power often surpassed both. The axe combined crushing weight with a razor edge. Its heavy head could smash through helmets and armor, while its sharpened blade sliced through mail and leather with frightening efficiency. Chronicles from the era describe axes cutting through limbs so swiftly that soldiers sometimes didn't realize they'd been maimed until they tried to move. And the axe was more than a blade. Its hooked edge could drag enemies from horseback, rip shields aside, and pry open armor seams. Combat manuals of the time even detail systematic methods for dismantling an opponent's defenses, step by step, until the killing blow could be delivered. Now we come to the true nightmare of the battlefield, the poleaxe. Measuring between 4 and 7 feet, this was no ordinary weapon. It was the medieval equivalent of a multi-tool engineered for destruction. On one side, a massive axe blade capable of cutting through steel. On the other, a hammerhead designed to crush plate armor. At the top, a piercing spike to drive straight through mail or weak points in plate. And every inch of it reinforced with metal strips called lingettes, preventing enemies from chopping through its wooden shaft. This wasn't random design. It was the peak of medieval engineering, an anti-armor solution that turned the most heavily protected knight into a vulnerable target. Archaeological finds show poleaxe strikes precisely targeting armor joints, the knees, armpits, neck, gaps, with surgical accuracy. These weren't wild swings. They were trained, calculated moves by warriors who studied anatomy as much as combat. To master the poleaxe was to graduate from medieval warfare's hardest sutko. Alham knights trained with it to refine every other weapon skill. Once you mastered the poleaxe, you could dominate with sword, dagger, spear, or mace. The word poleaxed survives today, describing someone knocked out cold. Its origin: prisoners executed with poleaxe blows to the head during the 15th century. That single word is a chilling testament to the weapon's reputation. Perhaps no weapon changed the Crusades more than the crossbow. Unlike longbows, which required immense strength and years of training, a crossbow could be operated by almost anyone. A peasant with a few hours of practice could suddenly kill a fully armored knight. The bolts it fired weren't simple arrows. They were armor-piercing projectiles, designed for specific purposes. Bodkin points split apart mail. Broadheads caused catastrophic bleeding in unarmored enemies. Specialized steel tips could puncture plate armor that even swords couldn't dent. And the power was staggering. Some crossbows had draw weights over 200 pounds, so powerful that bolts could punch straight through a knight and keep going, wounding soldiers behind him. The tactical impact was enormous. No longer could a heavily armored elite warrior dominate the battlefield. He could now be felled from hundreds of meters away by a farmer with a crossbow. It was so effective that the church tried to ban it in 1139, calling it inhumane. But of course, the ban was ignored. Its advantages were too great. The Crusades weren't just fought in open battle. Castles and fortified cities had to be taken, and for that, Crusaders turned to siege weapons. None were more terrifying than the trebuchet. This wasn't the crude catapult you've seen in children's books. The trebuchet was a masterpiece of physics. Using massive counterweights, it could hurl 300-pound stones hundreds of meters with pinpoint accuracy, smashing through castle walls like paper. But the trebuchet wasn't only about stone. Historical accounts describe them launching rotting animal carcasses, severed heads, and even plague-infected bodies into cities to spread disease and terror. Sometimes fear alone forced surrender long before the walls collapsed. Medieval engineers carefully calculated counterweight ratios, sling lengths, and trajectories with mathematical precision that rivals modern engineering. These machines weren't improvised. They were meticulously designed war engines. Individually, Crusader weapons were terrifying. Together, they formed an integrated system of destruction. Swords carried spiritual weight. Maces crushed through armor. Axes combined power and versatility. Poleaxes shattered even the toughest defenses. Crossbows democratized death. Siege weapons turned strongholds into traps. The Crusaders weren't primitive warriors stumbling through a dark age. They were part of one of history's most advanced military technology programs. Their weapons represented centuries of refinement, solutions to battlefield problems tested in the harshest laboratory imaginable: war itself. When we study these weapons today, it's not just about violence, it's about innovation. The tools forged in the Crusades influenced warfare for centuries. They created new doctrines, shifted power structures, and redefined what it meant to fight. And the lesson is clear. The Middle Ages weren't a time of ignorance and clumsy combat. They were an age where brilliant minds focused their genius on one terrible goal: finding new and better ways to kill. So the next time you watch a movie showing knights awkwardly swinging heavy swords, remember the reality. The Crusaders carried weapons so advanced for their time that they strike fear in historians even now. The arsenal of the Crusaders wasn't about brute force alone. It was about precision, symbolism, innovation, and above all, efficiency in ending human life. From sacred swords to mechanical siege engines, every weapon carried both physical and psychological weight. These weren't toys. They were the cutting edge of medieval science and faith forged into steel. If you want more deep dives into the brutal truths of medieval warfare, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. There's much more history hidden behind the myths, and together we'll uncover it.